Today's spotlight is on professor and entrepreneur Dr. Tayari Kuanda. Welcome to the show, Dr.
Hey,
Kuanda.
hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I
Thanks
love
for
it.
joining us. So, Dr. Kuanda, we're going to get into your extensive background in a bit, but let's start off with something fun. Can you tell our audience something interesting about you that we would not be able to find on Google?
Mm. Yeah, something you won't find on Google about me is that I love doing karaoke. I
Oh,
love doing
karaoke.
like
You're a
Nice.
karaoke, huh?
yeah, Frank Sinatra, some old classic Sinatra, 80s hair bands. I'll do everything from Bob Marley,
Oh,
Sinatra to
wow.
NWA, man. But I love karaoke.
I'm saying you got that voice too.
Nice.
You could probably do some Frank Sinatra.
Definitely.
Hey.
That's awesome. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay. All right. So Dr. Kwanda, you were a guest on Beyond the Scars recently, and I listened to your Beyond the Scars episode with our own Gianni Storm and Olivia, and it was absolutely fascinating. You grew up on the mean streets of Detroit, and then later in drug-infested South Central Los Angeles. You dealt with poverty, homelessness, and you had a really
Yeah.
complex relationship with your mom. And then you turned all of that struggle into a lot of positives for yourself and for others. Um, so my question, what was it like for you having such a tough road towards getting to success that you've achieved so far?
Man, I it's like a fish in water. You're just there. I see that there's clear water and bigger fish and smaller fish and with bigger meals, but I'm just in my lane, man, and focusing on survival and being, growing up being taught to persevere, and no matter what, you have to move on. So, it was rough, but I always had the idea that, all of this would mean something someday. All of this would benefit me somehow, some way, someday. And I didn't know anything other to do than just to keep forward. I definitely didn't want to stop. I didn't want to go back. I just had to keep forward and see where that pathway would lead.
That's interesting, and because I feel similar in that, when I was young and dealing with some struggles myself, it was just a matter of just keep moving forward, right? So now
Yeah,
you're a professor, and where are you? Where are you?
I'm in Southern California.
Okay, Southern California. So you're a professor in Southern
Mhm.
California, and you've done a lot. You actually have a nonprofit, you have a podcast, you have a broadcast company. So tell us about all of that.
Yeah, man. Well, all of those things are extensions of myself and my mission, really to help others. Even when I was poor, I didn't think poorly. I didn't think poorly of myself. I always felt a sense of importance and a sense of purpose, and I think that's what kept me going. And so now all these things, deciding to go, it was because of racism that I went into education. To
Interesting.
to help others and figured that was the best way I could give back. But then, the podcast is an outreach of just the idea and the firm belief that of folks exercising a voice and having a platform. The nonprofit SCORE, which is securing communities of racial equity, again, is an outreach designed to bring racial harmony and eradicate the debilitating effects of racism in communities, whether it's through training, civic leaders, teachers, students, and just intervening where it's needed. um, and the same with the media production company On Watch TV. It's a platform and an outlet, not only for the messages that I like to put across, but messages from people all around the world and opportunities for folks to, get into entertainment or to television and to have their stories and their creative content put out where otherwise they may not have that opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to like this question that we asked because you said your organization SCORE is about racial equity, and we just had a
Right.
quick fire question where we discussed, the shooting of this young black man, Patrick Leo- Leoya. I'm gonna say it correctly.
Lawyer.
Patrick Leoya. Yeah, he has a very interesting name. I love the way it's spelled, actually. um,
Mhm.
but the killing of him, and we watched the video. Um, how is how are we looking as far as police reform? What do you think needs to happen? How do we get
Oh.
police officers to see us as equals.
I think that that's something that's inbred in the culture. First of all, it's about the type of police officers that are hired, right? You don't just become a police officer and become abusive and disrespectful of any particular culture. That's something that you bring with you. And I know that
Mhm.
many police forces throughout history have had a habit of hiring individuals who are known to have a particular disregard for the rights of certain groups of people. For example, in Los Angeles, before the Watts riot, they were hiring individuals from southern states that were involved in the Jim Crow type situation. So they wanted to bring in people to quote unquote that knew how to control black folks, right? And
Hmm.
so and these things start top down. And again, I think it starts with education within the schools, within our communities, educational leaders, and we have to be involved. We have to be involved in the hiring practices. We have to be involved in oversight committees, and we have to be involved in policing our streets. And that takes training, that takes people to care, that takes individuals such as myself and all of us that are here listening to realize that we're all a part of the fabric, and in a sense, although we aren't, doing the dastardly deeds of pulling the triggers, we're all responsible. Somewhere throughout that police officer's life, somebody failed him somewhere. Or somewhere somebody failed in allowing him to have a gun and the authority to patrol streets,
Yeah,
And in some
yeah,
instances, someone's giving him a pass to be there. Right. This
yeah.
just doesn't happen today. Not singling out that particular officer because we
But
are
it's all.
inundated
Mhm.
with incidents of this type of brutality. I've experienced it, myself growing up in South Central Los Angeles.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I think it's just a matter of people not seeing black and brown people as people. Robin
Right.
Johnson says, I don't think it's a training issue because we have seen the police challenged by others and they do not pull their service weapon. We can't train out how they view black and brown and poor as less than. Point.
Hmm.
Jacqueline Robinson says, we also have to remember that the FBI SPLC warned over 15 years ago that white supremacist groups were quietly infiltrating, similar to what you were saying, Dr. Kwanda,
Hmm.
infiltrating police departments. It has less to do with training than a deliberate campaign of targeting and profiling. All right.
Yeah.
And
J-
Can I
it
just
should be
respond to that
noted
very
that this is
quickly?
an international issue as far as having white supremacist groups infiltrating police services. That's an international issue. That's
Yeah.
everywhere.
you wanted to respond to one of the
Right.
comments, Liz?
Yeah, just in terms of the training issue, when we say training, we're not just talking about teaching, a cadet how to be a police officer. We're also talking about the proper vetting of who should be in that cadet class
Yeah,
in the first place.
like Dr. Kwanda was saying.
Mhm.
I lived in New York for 21 years. A lot of those young cadets that they are bringing in to be police officers, they have no education beyond high school. And when they were in high school, they were bullied. They have very aggressive behavior and they aren't being trained on how to work in an urban environment in certain neighborhoods. They aren't certainly aren't trained on how to deal with special needs
Mm,
people in the community.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
all of that. It's not just,
Absolutely.
teaching them how to use a gun. It's all of that.
okay. Gianni, you have a question?
Yes. Okay, Dr. K. So my question actually comes from the part of your story on Beyond the Scars. When you were faced with the decision to be like your peers around you, um, to sell drugs, to be in the streets, doing drugs, and you decided to actually turn your back in a very specific instant in the story that you guys are going to have to watch or listen to, sorry. But my question is, as a teacher, do you try to instill the qualities such as that within, like, to your kids or to your students, um, given their circumstances or given their peer pressures? Are those qualities that you like to instill?
Yeah, absolutely. I teach all the time with an understanding of what it's like to be in those situations, especially when it comes to poverty. With the extreme end of homelessness, and to try to share my story and my experience to let them know that there are options, or if not, I don't, not I mean if not to be an advocate and a supporter and to look out for them to help them find other options because it's one thing to tell someone who is hungry, not to survive versus or not to eat versus or not to sell drugs versus showing them or providing an alternative. And so that's what I try to emphasize within my classroom. So definitely, um, and always illustrating the ill effects of what happens when you make that wrong decision, and it's
Yep.
something that needs to be sustained across schools because our students are living real lives, and it's real situations. So to answer your question, for sure, absolutely, I do.
That was a great question, Gianni. Robbie?
Um, when I was researching you, just impressive educational credentials, the more you know, hats off. I'm very curious if throughout your educational journey, if you were the recipient of any awards or scholarships, people trying to give you a leg up as you're trying to give
Mm,
people a leg up now.
Hmm.
I like to think that was the case, but I was not the recipient of that I can recall of any scholarships. I do recall at the end when I received my first two bachelor's degrees, the Department of Ethnic Studies where I was studying at UC Riverside, University of California, Riverside. There were lots of students receiving awards and this and that, and one of the professors recognized the uniqueness of my story and the dedication that I had put forth. And I did win an award. They wanted to recognize me with something. So I did win an award for, social and ethnic awareness, but I did not receive any scholarship. Well, that's not true. Let me go back. In community college, I did receive a few local scholarships. So definitely, I did. I recall that a few, maybe two or three. I had to go back some time. The wheels were clicking. But yeah, there were a few
we
local
all do.
scholarships, a few local scholarships that I received during community college. But as far as through um, uh, grad school and whatnot, no, there were not.
Oh,
But that
you did.
wasn't obviously that wasn't a deterrent for me.
Yeah.
No, clearly not. And is that what inspired you to offer scholarships to young people?
Well, what inspired me to offer scholarships to young people was my own story of being homeless in high school and having to work, and I'm playing football, and I'm so tired of and in the streets trying to survive, and I was falling asleep in class every day, first period. And the narrative that a few teachers had was that I was just another young, lazy black inner city kid, and not a lot of care and insight was poured into me. And that was far from the truth, as I tell people. I was living this life, but I'm showing up, because I want to do better, but I can only, function so long under those circumstances. And so with SCORE, that the scholarship that I have there, the incentive scholarship, um, is designed for students who are struggling. So it's just the fact of recognizing the pathway that I went through, the struggle that I went through, and realizing that there are students who struggle who are worthy, just as worthy as students who don't struggle academically. And to a greater point, there's something to be said about the way that we assess and grade students anyway on a scale of A to F, because that, time and time again has proven not to be the most effective way of determining the value, the propensity, and the
Mhm,
potential of students anyway. So
mhm.
that's what was the inspiration there.
I love it. Before we get
Wonderful.
to Lizzie's question, so Olivia online says, "How can a child qualify for the scholarship, and how can we donate funds to the scholarship?"
Sure. Well, the way a student qualifies is, and this is different, they have to have a 1.5 GPA or lower.
Hmm,
And that's very different,
interesting.
and I've been accused of rewarding failure. But again, I was struggling in high school, and had it been a snapshot taken of me at that particular time, I was not thought to be graduating or anything, let
Interesting.
alone being found worthy of a scholarship.
Okay.
And so the idea there is that I recognize that struggling students have value, they are capable, and I want them to know that they're capable. So by offering this scholarship, if someone had given me 500, a few $100s in high school, at that time when I was struggling, that meant, hey, I get to eat today. Maybe I'm paying for, bus tickets to get to school. I'm able to fix my car if I have one, pay an extra night in the motel so I'm not on the street. So anything that could assist and inspire. So the idea there is they 1.5 GPA or lower, they enter the scholarship. There's 9 different ways that they can respond to the question, whether it's through creating a podcast, a community uh, 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 advocacy campaign. They can write an essay, original film. There's 9 ways. They win, they get half the money there. The other half, after they have proven or shown that there are no more Fs at the end of the school year, they get the remaining. And hopefully
Oh,
that inspires them and incentivizes them to come back next
that's
year
nice.
and show and prove what they can do again.
So your
So they
scholarship
can
is basically to improve. Is the
absolutely
an incentive
engage
to
and
come up
improve.
from a 1.5 or lower and
Yep.
bring that up.
Yes.
I love it.
Absolutely,
I
on the way
love
to
it.
Yep.
graduation. And so they can go to the website, score 501c3.org. They can donate there. You can email me at score info at score 501c3 dot org, or reach out through Truth Lies and Shenanigans. They know how to contact me,
Absolutely.
and we're happy to make sure that your donation goes to a needy student. And the
Oh yeah.
scholarship is open year round. Initially, it had a deadline, but many schools are non-traditional in the sense that they're year round. So we want to make that available year round.
Okay. Liz.
And just for clarification, is the scholarship targeted at high school or college students?
Oh,
Great
yes.
question. It's for students in 10th through 12th grade.
Okay.
10th
Okay,
through 12th
wonderful.
grade.
Liz.
Firstly, professor to professor, can you share with our audience what subjects or concentrations do you teach?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, I'm in the School of Education, and
Okay.
so students there are working on their master's degrees and working to obtain a teaching credential. So there are about 10 courses they take through educational foundations as well as methods courses. And at various times, I teach all of those courses.
Wow.
And so it's, as a teacher, as a professor, the past 2 years have been 2.5 years now have been very difficult. On top of what we were already dealing with in terms of, like you said, students who need some help in their motivation, who are living, in non-traditional circumstances, but also with a lot of failing schools out there, right? Where students aren't getting the instruction that they may be motivated, they may want to learn,
Right.
but they're in situations where they're not getting that education. So what was during this pandemic, how were you able to continue to motivate, to try to help these
Abs-
students stay on track?
Absolutely. Fortunately, for me, I had already been doing classes through Zoom. So
Okay.
that format and becoming adjusted to that was huge for a lot of people in the first place. But again, the keeping the reality before myself and before my students at the university that they're needed, they're valuable, and this is going to pass. Um, no matter what, this is going to pass. So again, having and building those relationships, listening to the student stories, because there were a lot of students that were struggling. They're losing
Hmm.
family members. They are struggling with finances. So really, it was a time to be endearing and to be a listener as well as a professor, and sort of teaching with that type of care and insights to understand their experiences, and still to keep up the rigor and the expectations, but also you know being a real person that they could relate to, that made them understand that, what, this is a reality. This is something I want to come back to. I'm being able to be nurtured here through this course. I'm cared for. I'm respected and understood. And I think that motivated students a lot. In fact, many of them would tell me that, for some, including myself, that time we had together on Zoom was a time we looked forward to, where it was just an escape from some of the realities for, the hour and a half or 2.5 hour course that we would have, where we could really focus on becoming excellent teachers, and sharing the fact that a lot of folks were going through it. Sometimes you can feel so isolated and alone, but when you can share those stories, it really helps to create a family type environment where people feel welcome and where they want to be.
Uh,
And it should be noted that a lot of professors didn't take that approach. I know I seem very strong willed and in your face, but I recognized very early on that a lot of my students were struggling. So, where a lot of other professors, they were very strict about you have to have your camera on, you have to do that. I threw all of that out the window
Right,
because you never know
right,
what's going on the other side of that Zoom. So, if
yeah,
you
look,
need
absolutely.
Mhm.
to teach your
clapping.
If you need to keep that camera off, you go right ahead. I had one student who was
Thank
he
you.
was very motivated. He was having his Zoom classes in his bathroom because there was
Mm,
so much chaos going on. And what if I had
Aw.
been like, one of those you have to have your camera on no matter
right,
what. He
right,
never would have been in my
right,
class. He never
Mhm.
would have come
right,
back to my class.
Yeah.
So
right.
I appreciate, your motivation. I definitely appreciate that.
We're
Absolutely.
running short on time, but there's a lot of comments online. Olivia says it motivates you. This is speaking about your scholarship. It motivates you to do more and better because you're recognized as worthy and intelligent. I love it. Um, Fred Hargrove says, I love this. This is what inclusive looks like. Jeanette Brown, I love that. Underperforming does not mean without value. It often means traumatized with inadequate resources. Um,
Right.
Hmm.
Jacqueline Robinson says, what a very unique approach to the criteria required for the scholarship. And Jeanette Brown has another comment. So hard to learn when facing a huge host of problems other people can't or don't see. Creating safe
Yeah.
spaces where people can come together and feel safe is so important to helping people open their minds to learning, especially amid chaos. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Wow. All right, Dr. Kwanda, we are running out of time. Are there any last words you'd like to share? Any shout outs? Anything you'd like to say to our audience?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I would just, based upon the comments, and it's what I hope that people would feel and what I hope that people would emote. I hope this type of energy continues to spread. If COVID has taught us nothing, and many of us have understood this from before, we have to find non-traditional ways to deal with non-traditional problems, and we cannot go back, and we should not want to go back to what was deemed as normal because it has not worked for quite a few students. So as much as we can understand our students and understand that education is not a cookie cutter type situation, life is not a cookie cutter type situation, I think the better it is for all of us. So in my pursuit of continuing to strive to do my best for students, it's always about service and relationships, seeing folks for individuals, not having the expectations for everybody, not believing that everybody has to do the same thing to be successful. So you meet people where they are and accept them for who they are, and we do the best to get them to where they want to go. And so I hope that we all can share in that type of mission. I appreciate you for having me on, and feel free to reach out to me. I would love to have you on my show, and I'd love to
Absolutely.
be back as a guest. And there's so much to talk about. I love engaging people, and I love having these conversations. So thank you.
Absolutely. We'll definitely reach out. Can you let everyone know
Thank you.
where they can find you and find out
Yeah,
more
sure.
information?
Yeah, you know what? I have so many sites, so I like to just give out the link tree.
Okay.
If you get the link tree, which I
It's
don't know
actually in our
by heart, but let me.
description. So it's on
Oh, there
all
you
our
go. So
platforms.
yeah,
So you,
there you go. So with that link tree, if you want to consult with me on a consultation on Watch TV, the podcast, or any other the social media proofs or things I'm involved in, that link tree is best, and I
okay.
look forward to it.
All right. Well, we thank you
Thank
so
you so
much for
much.
Thank
joining us.
you.
There's still a bunch of
Thank you.
comments going online, so feel free to take a look at those while you're doing. And again, thank you so much. You're
My
fantastic.
pleasure.
All right,
My pleasure.
and,
My pleasure.
and we'll reach out and see you soon.